you were in the same room as Elon Musk, and that kind of got you
Yeah.
started thinking, right?
I worked on the merger actually between X into PayPal,
Got it.
and Elon was just this. Even at the time, it was obvious he was just such a unique unicorn in so many ways. But part of the, as you alluded to, he was my age. We were the same age. Uh,
Hmm.
we were in Silicon Valley, and I was servicing him and other entrepreneurs as an attorney and doing a lot of tech licensing, a lot of transactional work and mergers and financings. And he was creating things and had already started his, was now exiting his second business. And so it was kind of an inspiration to me of just through osmosis, really, of like, hey, I want to be creating, and I want to be in that world, and I can do it.
Yeah. And you had people like Peter Thiel probably nearby who was an attorney turned entrepreneur as well. So you did a startup which was kind of WeWork, kind of shared workspace. And then that one failed. So what did you learn from going through the failure with that one?
You know, I learned a lot of things. I think uh, one of the things I learned early on, or from that first one at least, was that there are a lot of factors to success, and a lot of those factors, especially when we think of entrepreneurial set success at a scale that we aspire to or think of or that we romanticize, there are so many factors to that are out of our control. One, there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck in kind of the timing and the resonance of an idea or a company that really, yeah, a brilliant entrepreneur can smell trends out like that, but
Mhm.
to really hit it, there's a lot of it that's luck. And then, of course, the other factor out of our control is the macro environment, the economy, um, black swan events, that like uh, the crash and recession.
Well, yeah, and it
Um,
was like 2008 when this was happening, right?
yeah, yeah, and I'll never forget when the actual stock market crash happened. Um, you know, in '08, I thought, oh, I've been conservative. I think we're well positioned. We'll be in a good place. But as time went on and the sheer length of that recession went on, not only myself, I saw many other entrepreneurs finally buckled. They just couldn't last it out. There is this element of lasting things out, and that went on for so long that even
Mhm.
a lot of companies and ideas and entrepreneurs who were well positioned at the beginning, it just outlasted them. And that was the case with me too. So I went through a period of over a year, I talk about in the book, where I knew the idea was over and failed, but I
Mhm.
was in a position I couldn't just scuttle the ship and walk away because I had some big loans that I had guaranteed. So I spent a literally over a year just trying to um, find a way out of those loans and work it out with banks. And it was hard because banks were in crisis at the time. And so the ownership of those banks, the control of those banks was changing and shuffling with the regulators and so on. And so I would get close with one
Mhm.
executive, and that executive would leave, and the government would take over the bank, and then I'd have to start over with another regulator or whatever. So it was just discouraging and difficult to make any progress. But um, I, uh, to be honest, came out of that and I was desperate. I was looking for a job. I had 6 kids, and I needed to create some income and put some money on the table. And so uh, I was really intent on looking for a job, and had kind of been burnt on entrepreneurship I had
Yeah.
had all I needed at that point. And uniquely, looking back, that desperation I was in was actually my salvation because people weren't hiring in the job market either. That the job market was rough,
It
certainly in
was.
law and really anything else. And so I was really in a desperate point. And I tell BYU students all the time, who are aspiring entrepreneurs, I tell them that the biggest obstacle to them will be the fact that they are BYU graduates and that they are highly employable and that they can command a good paycheck. And it will be a lot easier, or it was a lot easier for me in a state of desperation to embrace risk than it would have been or will be for you to walk away from a six-figure
Right.
paycheck.
Mm,
And so I'm actually grateful in retrospect that I was in such a desperate situation because it made
mhm.
me, I think, um, preternaturally open to the risk that I otherwise wouldn't have been. And that's what happened. I went on a trip with my boys to San Francisco. We went to a trampoline park there, and
And that was the first time you'd ever seen one, right?
first time I'd ever seen
They're
one.
brand new. Yep.
Brand new. There was less than 10 across the
Mhm,
country at the time.
mhm,
And so the idea, just the way I interacted for the first time with that idea was just my mind was all over the place. And the biggest thing that I came to was I can do this. This is within the realm of possibility. I think I can figure it out. Um, and from there was able to just step by step take simple steps to get this thing open. I found a building,
mhm,
negotiated a lease, found creative financing methods with the landlord, with the
mhm,
trampoline equipment maker, with friends and family, um, bootstrapped
mhm.
plus. It was more
Well,
than bootstrapping. It was literally making soup from a stone, but I was able to get it financed.
well, and in the book, one thing that's so great is you're really clear at that point, your goal was to bring $5,000 a month home. You were trying to cover expenses. And it's not like sometimes you get the idea, oh, he set out to build $1 billion company and move for 20 years, but that's not what happened, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
You know, it's interesting in my case. I think a lot of the tech ventures I worked with when I was in Silicon Valley, and I think even today, a lot of these tech ventures that get funded by venture capital, they're starting with a proposition, frankly, an assumption that to be worth the investment, that there needs to be a possibility of this thing being
yeah.
worth as they say in venture capital, a 10x multiple, or
Mhm.
really being multiple hundreds of $1 million market cap, or it won't attract investment. And I never had that. I never at all believed that the market cap of what I was doing could be more than a certain amount of free cash flow every month.
Mm.
So yeah, a lot of times I think we glorify having the end in mind and really visualizing a plan from A to B.
Mhm.
That really wasn't the case for me. My my aspirations were much smaller. My goals were a lot more modest,
Mhm.
and so it was really the power of the idea and the timing and factors beyond my vision or control that led to the growth of the company.
Yeah, and so you talk about how when you're teaching, so you've been teaching, if people don't know, BOU students here as an adjunct in this great business class that we have, and you teach them not to be scared of the risk. Well, you say be scared, but not it's not dangerous, right? Scary but
Yeah,
not dangerous. So explain that. How is it? How do you have the
yeah.
right balance, especially if failure is likely? You know?
Yeah. It's really the reason for that analogy, first of all, to just connect it to what I said earlier is, you know, I s- I really it's important teaching BYU students and other university educated entrepreneurs to get over the fear of walking away from structured paycheck lives.
Yeah.
And so we talk about this scary but not dangerous, more people are afraid to fly than to drive. But if you take those and hold them side by side, flying is a lot safer
Right.
than driving a car. But being in the air, being detached from the ground, that's scary to people. And so there are a lot of reasons that touch upon our sense of security that make something scary. But the truth is, things work out. And in entrepreneurship, things work out. Um, and you have to have that faith to believe that in order to push off into the unknown. And So that keeping that scary versus dangerous idea in mind is really important at the early onset.
So you got to deal with that side of it, and then you've
Yeah.
also emphasized that you should find joy in entrepreneurship. Like look at
Yeah.
the positive part of business, and I'll reference one great story from the book in a minute. But first, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, we talk a lot in philosophy or in psychology, really, about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how, um, as we satisfy certain uh, levels in our life, certain appetites, that we're then able to focus, um, on higher and more noble aspirations. And that is true of our economy as well, and of entrepreneurship. Affluence in America and frankly throughout the world has now meant that entrepreneurship has kind of moved. A lot of the obvious problems and pain points of life have been solved or are in the process of being solved. And that means, that was, of course, for hundreds and even thousands of years, the main source of entrepreneurial ideas was finding pain, identifying pain, and then finding a solution to that pain. And that was the formula that we taught it in schools, and we analyzed ideas and valuations through that. Now we're at a point in our progress as a society where people have the discretionary income to spend not just on solving pain, but on creating joy uh, in their lives, having experiences that affect their their sense of joy and well-being and worth. And so now we can have profitable entrepreneurial ideas and companies that cater to providing joyful experiences. And we see that all the time. I of course always reference Disney as the godfather of the joy and experience entrepreneurial industry, because no one needs an amusement park,
Right.
but by golly, people are willing to pay for an amusement park experience. And that's what, we learned that over the last 50 years. And now that's spread into our choices for restaurants, on our vacations, on our subscriptions that we're willing to pay for. People are looking for ways to add joy uh, to their life. And so entrepreneurs need to get out of that pain mindset and into what's a joyful experience I can provide to people, because people will pay for it.
Yeah, and so you mentioned earlier spotting a good trend, which you definitely did, and it was one of these joy markets with the trampoline market, which is blown up. They're everywhere now, hundreds of locations across the U.S. The what if you were looking for the next one? How do you do it?
Yeah, I look at personally, I look in these experience markets, these kind of active entertainment markets. I saw pickleball forming early on. I saw that was going to be something, and sure enough, here it goes. So I think there are going to be additional sports, and continued active pursuits. People are going to continue to want to be active as we move more toward AI, more toward um, the digital world fulfilling tasks for us. We are going to be looking for leisure ways to stay active. And so I think pickleball is a good model going forward for different types of physical experiences we can be trying to provide. I had some BYU students recently who opened a padel
Yeah,
business, kind of the
that's a,
next sport beyond pickleball, and there will continue to be those. I also think we're going to see. I talk a little bit about this in the book, but instead of just a virtual reality entertainment world, I think we're going to see more of an augmented reality entertainment world, where we want physical, tangible, tactile experiences, but we want technology to um, uh, make them better and amplify them. And I think that's the next frontier for entrepreneurs, is to find ways to utilize technology to make physical, tactile experiences better. And I'm excited to see that. I think it's happening. We have a great entrepreneur here who recently, who's kind of reinvented laser tag. And instead of technology, instead of all lasers hitting people, there's actual tactile darts
Okay.
and
That's it.
bullets, soft bullets that hit you, but you still get the gamification and the scoreboard of a
Mhm.
laser tag. So he's built the skin that can still capture all those hits when you get hit with a dart. And so we're seeing this merging of the physical tactile experience world with the technology of video games. And I think those
Yeah.
worlds are gonna morph. I'm here for it. I'm so excited
Yeah.
for it.
Well, now that you mentioned it, I've seen a couple of venues kind of try to do that. So I see that, yeah, that's probably a trend. You must have worried early on, and the book you talk about a little bit, but you must have worried, well, trampolines could be a fad. We don't know how long
Yeah.
this is going to last, but it turns out not a fad. Like it seems pretty consistent. How do you decide whether something's going to stay?
Yeah, I think the key there is not whether it will be a fad or not, because everything's a fad. But having vision to see how your fad can be broader than what you're currently offering. In other words, is there room for evolution? Is there room for the idea to change? And I think early on, what we realized was, yes, we were in the trampoline park industry, but at the end of the day, we were in the four-wall entertainment industry, and we were ready, open, and creatively trying to find different activities to put within the four walls of our facility. And we knew that even if trampolines went out, people were still going to want to have physical fun. And that's borne out. Right now, when we started, these parks were 100% trampolines.
Mhm.
Now, uh, a so-called trampoline park is probably only 35% trampolines. And now instead you've got obstacle courses, you've got slick slides, you've got basketball dunk jam courts. So
Mhm.
that will continue to change, and those attractions will continue to respond to different fads. But really, we're not in the business of trampolines. We're in the business of four-wall fun. And so entrepreneurs need to be open. They need to build a big enough net with their business that it can evolve with
Uh,
trends, and that's
mhm.
important.
Well, and another one that you mentioned in the book that was when Ninja Warrior became really popular. You guys jumped right on that, and it turned out to be a really good move. The You talk in the book a lot about relationships, and you had some that worked out really well. So it seems like CircusTrix, you found an equity investor where Sky Zone couldn't.
Yeah.
That's how it reads anyway. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, you were able to acquire them. How did those relationships happen?
Yeah. And by the way, that was literally the difference
Mhm.
between the two companies and who ended up winning and who didn't.
Mhm.
Um, and it was because I had an investor, and really more than an investor, a partner, Jason Peary and Peary Partners, who were associated with BYU as well, the
Mhm.
Peary family, longtime investors based in Palo Alto. And because the Peary family, their family office was a family office, they didn't have outside money or limited partners like many venture capital and private equity firms do today. And because of that, they had complete freedom to invest in
Mhm.
what they wanted and in as broad a portfolio as they wanted. And that was key because, you know, turns out venture capitalists also have limited risk tolerance, and they answer to limited partners, and so they're chasing trends as well. And so it really took someone like Jason Peary with the vision and the risk tolerance to invest in this fringe concept of trampolines, which had this veneer of so much liability, which I talk about in the book, that scared so many investors away, but it didn't scare the Pearys away. And that relationship is what really allowed the company to become what it became,
Mhm.
because Jason and I worked so well together. We trusted each other. We stuck together through thick and thin. And that relationship, as you point out, and I talk about in the book, that ultimately was what won in our industry. It wasn't Case Lawrence. It wasn't that we had this better mousetrap or anything. It was because of the relationship with Jason Peary and Peary Partners.
Well, and I think you pretty quickly over-delivered on what they were expecting, and so then he came back to you and said, "Hey, I'm gonna give you more money. Let's do more."
Yeah,
Is that? Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. Yeah, um, we did a test. We did a trial, basically. He funded 3 parks and said, this will be our sample size. Let's see how things go. And the reality is, at the time, that was such a great way to structure it, and it really motivated me to put my all into those 3 parks. That's actually what happens all the time with venture capital. You know, they put in their first round, their seed round or their A round, and there's always a plan to do more if things work out well. And so, you know, it's really, for entrepreneurs, it's important. I always try to teach them that relationship with the investor is sacred. It really is a marriage. It's not anything temporary or fly by night. If someone has the confidence in you to invest in your concept, you need to treat that relationship as if it is the most sacred in business. And what ends up happening is no relationship can return more to you in value than that if you treat it right as well, because your best follow-on investor is your current investor. That's always the case.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that. They get a little short-sighted, especially young entrepreneurs, short-sighted with their relationships, and they're not afraid to burn those personally, thinking that there's always another one over the horizon. That doesn't work that way. You need to really treasure and treat those investment relationships sacredly.
Yeah. Well, and you navigate some other relationships pretty well. My favorite part of the book probably is you talk about acquiring your competitor, and you're at your daughter's wedding, about to go into the temple, and you have this tense phone call with Rick, the head of the senior head of the other company.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite parts too. Thanks for mentioning it. And it wasn't my wife or my daughter's favorite part, though. I can tell you that they were anxious as we were in the parking lot of the Newport Beach Temple. But you know, one of the realities is that entrepreneurs are, you know, there's some unique personalities and characters. It takes some unique characters to create really good things. And you know, what I wanted to really highlight with that story is, you know, Rick Platt, and I would say this right in front of him. And I have said it. He's a complicated guy, and it wasn't, you know, that deal was not going to get done without really delving into his psyche and being willing to get into that with him. And you know, at the end of the day, again, relationships matter, and building trust with people who are totally different than you, who think differently than you, whose interests and incentives are different than yours. At the end of the day, even when millions and millions of dollars are on the line, it's about the relationship and about trust. And so I have no doubt that is what got that deal over the line when they had tried to do it multiple times before and failed. And it was really my relationship with Rick that made the difference. And at an earlier time in my career, Dave, I probably wouldn't have been mature enough to see that, and I would have blown up and blown the relationship up much earlier at the first or second time he did something crazy. But I'd grown and I had seen a lot, and so I was able to be a better human being, and being a better human being always leads to better business. There's just no disconnecting those two.
That's true. Sometimes I think of law firm, Dave, and what I would have done, you know, 20 years ago. And I'm a much gentler person now. Yeah.
You and I are both repentant lawyers, right?
That's right. That's right. Once you're, but good background for a lot of things. So I know we're almost out of time. The book Off the Ground it's one of my favorite business autobiographies I've read. It's really good, and some great actionable advice for people. What do you hope people take away from it?
I hope people, well, first, let me answer that by telling you what my favorite biography was. And by the way, thank you for saying that. Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's Shoe Dog.
I knew you were going to say it. It's the most similar book.
biography. And so I
Yeah.
modeled mine after that, in the sense I wanted to be real. I wanted to be authentic. I wanted to share the true ups and downs, not make it a glam story, but really highlight some of the travails of entrepreneurship. So I hope people get that out of it. I hope they get a very sincere, honest, warts and all look at entrepreneurship and what it takes to create something, and maybe behind the sloganeering and the the current glamification of entrepreneurship. I didn't have a vision from the beginning. I didn't know this was going to be $1 billion thing. I was making it up as I went along, faking it till I made it. And I want people to know that that's 90% of the time what's really happening, out
Yeah.
there. And that's okay.
Yeah. Nice. And then, like you said earlier, that just to know that things will work out, that we're all
Yeah.
humans, it's gonna work, you know? So
Faith is not just a religious, spiritual concept. It is so important in entrepreneurship. And we call it different things, but at the end of the day, it is that. It's faith. And you gotta believe that things are gonna work out. Not always the way we want them to, but good things will happen. And I in the thousands of cases in entrepreneurs I've worked with, that's true.
yeah.
I know it's true.
Fantastic. And just as a final note, I should mention you're off to Budapest, Hungary. You start in a couple weeks here as mission president of that mission. And
Yeah.
how's your Hungarian, and how do you think business is going to translate over to that?
Well, it's funny. My Hungarian, I learned Hungarian the first time 35 years ago,
Okay.
and I haven't had a lot of opportunity to speak it since returning home. I tell people it's kind of like sediment at the bottom of a pond. The more I'm studying, the more it's stirring up down there. So I've gotten better, but I've got a long way to go to catch up with some of the missionaries over there. But we're going to keep working at it.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, lucky group of missionaries. I know it's going to go well. And thanks for taking the time. I'll put a link on Amazon to the book in the description here. People can find it there or wherever books are sold. And you're active on LinkedIn, maybe less so for the next 3 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Fantastic.
so. Well, Dave,
Okay.
thank you. And thanks for
Case,
all you're
thanks a
doing
lot.
at BYU. I love
Yeah.
what you're doing, and keep it up.
Thanks. Really pleasure talking to you. Appreciate it.